I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's joining. We had an overwhelming response when we put out an invitation to this. We were booked out within 48 hours, which is just really fantastic and says so many things about the community that we've got here and the interests and passions that people have to improve in this space. So I'm really excited to see you all and to see some names that I don't know, which is even better than seeing old faces. Why are we doing this? So Betfair, our vision is that we exist to champion winning. We pride ourselves on the point of difference with the rest of the industry, that we want to help you be better at what you do. I have a whole team that is dedicated to that, to automation, to data, to helping people access our API and to get smarter at what they do and how they do it. And I don't have all the answers. I've got a lot of the questions, but I don't have all the answers. And the more that we share with people who do have those answers, like these guys, the more we can all learn. Like I said, you know, we are on your side, me probably more than anyone. So if you don't already know me, please reach out. Please reach out to me and my team. You can hit up the email address api@betfair.com.au or on Twitter or anywhere else. If you want any support in this space. We're big on getting you access to historical data, to our API, to helping you automate. We can't help if you don't talk to us, so let us know. In that space, one of my big passions is community. I know that this can be a really isolating field, particularly for those of you who model, who are devs. And the more we can share this journey, the easier and more sustainable it is. And that's where a lot of these knowledge sharing and meetup sessions have come from. In this space, there are some awesome things that are happening. Some of our guys here actually started a Slack community a few months ago that is absolutely vibrant and thriving, has people who talk on it all day, every day. If you're not part of that, please reach out. It's Betfair-Quants. Very welcome to join. Open community there. We also are working on setting up an Australian and New Zealand based GitHub repo for our community to share their libraries and sample code, so that, again, people aren't starting from scratch if they don't need to. If you want to contribute to that, again, hit us up, api@betfair.com.au or anywhere else. Yeah, we'd love contributions to that. My final bit before I sort of outline how we're going this evening is I'm hiring. I want someone else in my team, someone else who's passionate about helping people be smarter, be better, passionate about community and connecting with people. Really helps if they're technologically literate. If that's you or someone that you know, please hit us up, because you know, if you've talked to Ben before, who's in my team at the moment, he was one of our VIPs previously. Often our clients are our best employees, because you guys know what we're working with. So if you have any references, please hit us up. Counting on you. Okay, so this evening we have Jonathan Lowe and Tom Bishop joining us. These are two of my favourite modelling based clients on the exchange. Both have data science backgrounds. Both have similar but very different journeys and different approaches to how they do what they do. And probably my favourite thing is how articulate they both are in sharing their opinions in this space. So I couldn't think of anyone better with a data science focus to talk this evening. So we're going to start with a little bit of a one-on-one with each of them so that we can learn a little bit about who they are, where they come from, how they've got where they are now, and what they do. Then I've asked them both to think about some practical advice to share, maybe something they wish that they'd known earlier. It's often those takeaways are some of the best things for you guys to come out of these. And then we'll open to a Q&A. So down the bottom of your screens, there is a Q&A button there. Please feel free to ask questions. We've already got some coming in. Chuck them in there. We will answer as many as we can tonight. And if we can't we'll follow up as best we can, either with individuals or more broadly. So to start, I'm going to start with you, Jono. Tom, feel free to turn your camera off if you don't want to sit there for a few minutes. Up to you.
Yeah.
So, Jono, data science background, been in the game a while. Can you give us your story? So, what's your background? How did you get here? Odd place for a data scientist to land.
Thanks very much, Kerrin, and thanks for this opportunity to have a chat to all the Betfair community as well. The Betfair community is really good. It's great to exchange ideas and learn from each other, and so thanks for that opportunity. Unlike a lot of professional gamblers, I wasn't sort of born into the industry. I didn't have parents who were jockeys or anything else like that. I had no idea about gambling when I was growing up. In fact, this is a funny story. I remember my very first bet that I made. When I was about 20, I went into a TAB, a Melbourne Cup day, because I thought, you got to have a bet, right? And I filled out the form. I heard that trifectas boxed were great, and I put in 10 of them, 10 horses, and ticked a $20 bet and gave it to the lady behind the till, and it came up that I'm making a $14,000 bet. It wasn't really what I wanted, so I just said, I just want to bet $20. And so they said, just take away some of the horses, and I made the bet, and whatever it is. But I guess I got into the industry because I went to uni. I was very fortunate enough in the topics that I did. I did a double degree in statistics and psychology, and I also did a minor in computer programming. So you put statistics, computer programming, a little bit of psychology in there, you've got a pretty good grip of what it takes to be a computer modeler. And I started my PhD at Swinburne University. It's very famous for a lot of pro punters have come out there. And the reason why that is because Professor Stephen Clark was there. He used to run a computer model that was a tipping model. And he used to put those tips in the Herald Sun. And week after week, or year after year, sorry, they used to beat the expert tips of the Herald Sun. And one of his students used to say, well, why are you using this for tipping? Like, why don't you use it to make money? And one of his students actually sort of taught me about how you can utilize models to make money in gambling. And so I got that, and I was doing my PhD in sports statistics. I was putting up tennis predictions up on the web, on the Swinburne web. People started following them. People started saying, this is great. I've got, oh, wow, cool, whatever. And then there was a lot of people wanted to buy them and I get them. And so they said, why don't you sell them? So I started selling them. I still wasn't betting them at all. I still hadn't made any bets and hadn't made it for many years, in fact. Until as a poor uni student, I probably didn't get the opportunity to make many bets. And then that kept on going really well. And I did some work for Best Bets magazine. Best Bets wanted to get into, they're the horse racing magazine. They wanted to get into sports. So I had to create databases to come up with data for them. So I created databases for NRL, for AFL, for Formula One, for everything else. And with all those databases, I was selling some of that information to Best Bets, but at the same time, creating models and selling that on my new webpage, Sport Punter. Essentially then, after a little while, I teamed up with Matt and Jess from Punting Ace, who were around. My knowledge of horse racing was completely abnormal, and I knew nothing about horse racing, but I wanted to create a model. I remember asking Matt, what does it matter if a horse runs wide in the straight? Like, I mean, what does it matter? But my knowledge of talking to people and learning new things and learning all these things made me create better models. Like you'd go down to the pub and some guy would say, oh yeah, that horse can never win. It can't win third up on a long distance. And I go, oh, hang on a sec, does that make any sense? So I go to the database and see, do horses struggle third up if it's a long distance or something like that? And then half the time it's wrong, sometimes it's right. And then you can explore those things and add new variables into your models. And so that's what I did. Over time, I've stopped Sport Punter. I still sell to dailyprofit.com.au, but I mostly bet myself just because it was more profitable than selling. But it was amazing early in the piece how little people knew about gambling. And we're talking like 10, 15 years ago. When I was used to selling, I had one client, he came to me and said, look, I've cancelled my subscription, he said, because I bet big on every single bet you made where it said a 99.7% increase or more, and you lost money. And I'm like, well, this is the fallacy of betting to win is different. It's betting for value, and that's what you need. And not many people knew what betting for value meant and the mathematics behind that. So essentially that's where I'm at now. I've got models in lots of different areas. I've got probably 60 different leagues in basketball, betting on Russian basketball teams that I can't even pronounce. Yeah. So, so it's all automated because there's a lot of data, a lot of information. But my day-to-day is sort of like fine-tuning and betting as well, and fine-tuning models and adjusting for different outcomes. So, yeah, that's my story, I guess, how I got here.
So I've got a couple of follow-ups on that quickly. So one of the things that I found particularly interesting from that was your point about trying to learn a bit more about what the data meant from your friends. So I had a funny experience with some of our data scientists in-house a couple of years ago when they first got access to some of the punting form data, and they had a look at that. And someone went, "What's the rail? What's this? And what does it mean?" And it was really interesting, them sort of learning what they were looking at. And I've heard lots of different opinions about how much understanding the data that you're working with does or doesn't matter for then being able to model it effectively. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, 100%. I mean, when I first started in the industry, there were people who are older than me that couldn't understand that I could be betting on some tennis player that I've never actually seen play tennis. Okay, they're of the caliber that you have to watch, you have to learn, you have to understand. Like, you see a horse, is it okay, or whatever else like that. But that's not necessarily, that can be great for some people, fantastic, whatever which way works for you. But as far as for me, it wasn't. It was about data analysis. And as I said before, I do nothing. I was a big sports fan, so I knew a lot about sports. But as horse racing went, I didn't know much about it at all. And I just created ratings for horses and ratings for jockeys and ratings for trainers. And then just all those intricacies about rails and things like that. And some people saying, oh, the rail, the barrier doesn't matter much if it's on doesn't matter as much if it's on a long race. And so I just went to the data and analysed it completely. Is that true or not? And if it is true, I'll put it in the model. If it's not, well, that's your loss if you're biasing your bets based on this information. And a lot of people like the old timers sometimes have those ideas in their head and they stick with it and they can't get away from it. But the beauty about programming and in the statistical point of view is that you can test all these things and you can see which ones are actually true and which ones are not. And yeah, so I think even if you don't have any knowledge of sport or horse racing, then it doesn't mean you can't get into it, because I had no knowledge about gambling and I got into it. And I had no knowledge about horse racing and dog racing and I got into it as well. So there's plenty of times to learn, to chat to people about effects and things like that and what makes a difference. And just pub talk, basically, when you're talking about certain games or sports, and that's how you can learn and put that in your model and test for it. So
the other thing that I spend a lot of my time talking to people about is around, once you've got a set of ratings in, someone like you've got really good quality ratings. How do you go from having a set of good quality ratings to then turning that into a betting strategy? Like you said earlier, you had customers who got your ratings but didn't know how to bet them. A model isn't worth anything if you don't know how to bet it. Do you spend a lot of time back testing, or do you just go into the market? Do you have opinions on how you approach that?
Yeah,
obviously, don't give you a secret sauce, but
that's a big question, because in a lot
within 2 minutes.
How long? 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Back testing is so important. You have to back test. You've got your data set, you analyze it, you find out which variables are important, and then for example, you analyze the data from 2010 to 2015 and only use that data, but with the variables that you created at the end, and then see how you went in 2016. And then you use 2010 to 2016 and see how you went in 2017. And then you do that again for 18. And then you're not getting any bias in your model that you're creating. there's other different methods as well that you can use, and I can go into them later. There's more to talk about, but then that gives you the confidence to know that, look, if the model's working, it's producing results. So therefore you've got the confidence to use that model, same again, into live betting as of now. So yeah,
nice. My final one on that before we swap over to Tom. One of our previous sessions, I know you were there, we had Stu Williamson, and he spoke about how for him, you can have all these great ideas, but until your money actually hits the market, it can be really hard to know how you impact things. Have you found a significant variance between your back testing and what happens when you start impacting the market?
Yeah, because if you impact the market, it's going to change the odds as well. So that will make a difference. So you've got to, I guess you can allow for that. When you're back testing, it's important to know what odds do you use. Are you using the final odds? Are you using 5 p.m. odds where you normally bet, or using 9 a.m. odds? Or whenever you bet, you've got to try and get those odds that you use at that time. Because as time goes on, the odds generally get a little bit more efficient to the start. There are some sports that are more efficient than others, some markets that are more efficient than others. So it's really important that when you're back testing, you have to really simulate exactly how you would do it live. So you can only use the data from beforehand. You're only using odds that you would use live as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I've got a screed of questions coming through. I'm not ignoring you. We'll come back to them in a little bit. Jono, I'm going to swap over with Tom, so Tom gets a chance. So if you want to turn your camera off, completely up to you, so you get a few minutes off. So Tom, I've known you a while now, a couple of years. Can you give us a bit of your history? Because you, a bit like me, you don't come from a wagering background. I know that. How did you get where you are?
Yeah, very similar to Jono, I guess. Like, you hear a lot of these stories, and people are coming from racing families, or their parents were big bettors or something like that. It's very much the opposite story for me. I guess I've always been a sports fan, mostly sort of basketball and AFL and stuff like that. And then probably in the early podcasting days, I heard of this guy in the US called Haralabos Voulgaris, who's like a pretty famous NBA bettor. I heard him on an NBA podcast I was listening to or something like that. And that just sounded like the coolest thing that I'd ever heard of. Like, he was making a living betting on NBA. He was a huge NBA fan. It just seemed like something, I don't know, one of the first things that you're like, wow, that's a cool thing. I'd really like to do that. And then I guess that was probably during uni. And at uni, I did like a maths and stats degree, what was called operations research, which is sort of like applied maths. But it was very like pen and paper. I didn't do a lot of programming, which I resent uni for. But I didn't really know, like I had no hands-on experience with data or anything like that. So the concept of making a predictive model actually made no sense to me, because the university didn't give me any experience doing that. And then I got a job at a bank, sort of doing analytics and working in the credit risk modeling department and stuff like that. And I started to sort of learn programming pretty rapidly. And then it sort of became a feasible pursuit. So like halfway, sort of 2 years into working at a bank, I sort of thought I would try my hand at being Haralabos and build an MBA model. But my knowledge of wagering and my sort of modeling skills was still pretty average. So I put a whole bunch of work into that and lost all my money. And then I sort of forgot about it for a little while. I sort of did a few different jobs, worked in consulting and stuff like that. And I saw like a data science job at Betfair, which I applied for and I got. And that sort of really reinvigorated my interest in sort of quantitative betting models and professional gamblers. So we got the experience to meet some sort of professionals, and we were able to sort of see what kinds of things people were betting on and stuff like that, because we were in the sort of data science analytics team. So that really got me more interested, and sort of I started to think about it a little bit more. And by that time, my skills had sort of developed more as well. And then part of my job at Betfair was to develop the first sort of greyhound ratings model that was put on the Betfair hub, with some data that we got from Fast Track. And I guess that got me, was not interested in racing at all. I'm still not interested in racing, but it got me interested in the problem, and it made me realize why people were sort of quantitative people were interested in that particular modeling challenge, because it is a very difficult modeling challenge. And the nature of it, how frequently there are races and stuff like that, it's really it's a really well suited problem for gambling, because if you have an edge, you will realize it in a period of time which is feasible, and if you don't have an edge, you will also realize it in a feasible time as well. Whereas if you're betting on basketball, you might have a not statistically significant edge, but still make a profit over a season or two, something like that. And that was something that I decided was like not something that would be okay for me. So I sort of dug into that a little bit more and spent some time sort of improving my model and getting data from myself, scraping data off the internet and stuff like that, and building my own database and whatnot. And then I left Betfair a little bit ago, and I was sort of in between jobs, and sort of gave it a sort of a full-time go for a few months, and was able to improve it to the point where like started making some actual money, which was good. That's probably my journey.
Yeah, and still one of my favorite people to debate with, particularly when we had new people in the data science team, and listening to Tom Schoolum is always good fun.
Everyone calls me opinionated, and I'm not sure if they mean it in a good way or a bad way.
Always a good way. Always a good way. I'm going to ask you the same sort of question that I asked Jono, because I watched you do bits of this. So I remember when you started, you hadn't watched a greyhound race. You didn't have a clue about anything when it came to dogs. And then now you would be pretty damn high in terms of your understanding of the data that you look at and that you model.
Yeah.
How much did you invest in understanding what you were looking at, or were you more focused on simply using the data itself to tell you, to find those out?
Yeah, I think it's very important to have some domain info to map the data that you're seeing onto. You need to be able to understand, I guess, broadly what the data means. And if you have no domain info, your development process is going to be pretty limited. You'll build a basic model based on the few things that you're aware of. And then when it comes to trying to think about ways that you could improve it or tweak it or something like that, you'll sort of hit a brick wall. So I definitely don't know a lot about greyhounds. And if like I talk to an expert greyhound person, like I would have no idea what they're talking about. But I did, you definitely need a rudimentary understanding. And that was sort of hard to get, I think, with greyhounds. With thoroughbreds, there's sort of like lots of content online and lots of people on Twitter who would sort of opinionated and telling you how they think the race is going to go and stuff like that. And that kind of thing, seeing sort of qualitative observational type punters talk about their approach, I think is a really good way to give you ideas, like Jono said, give you ideas about how you could turn that into some kind of variable or some kind of attribute that you could test. If you don't look at those kinds of opinions from people who actually understand it, the sort of the idea creation process of coming up with new angles and new variables and stuff like that is going to be very difficult.
So having, started with NBA and, given that away for a while and then come back to Greys, what are your focuses now? So you've got an automated model on greyhounds.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you're doing beyond the Greys?
Yeah, I've got a model for Australian greyhounds and UK greyhounds, and I have a thoroughbred model that I've worked on that's awful and doesn't make any money. But it's sort of it's a difficult process because they're very involved projects. So it's hard to, as a single person, sort of prioritize your time in a way that you give everything enough love. So my approach is to sort of get something up and running at small stakes to sort of test things in live market trading, and then go back once you've got some time and review what's been happening and how you can make improvements. I just haven't got to that part yet. So they're probably the two main or three main things that I'm working on at the moment.
So on that, tangential but related, I know that we were all really sad when you left because you're a great team member, and I know that one of your things was that you did enjoy working in a team.
Yeah.
How are you finding working on your own? I know it's something a lot of people have challenges with, and how do you keep motivated and on track and inspired?
It's probably a weird time to answer the question because it's been so unusual.
Yeah.
Like if there was no quarantine and like I was out going to the gym every day like I was before and stuff like that, I think it would be a lot easier. But just being housebound, it sort of compounded the issues with the solitary work, I think. But yeah, it's definitely different, and you don't have, like, sometimes you just need a little bit of an outlet every day just to like talk about some random stuff and whatnot. And the Slack channel's been a bit of a help with that. And I obviously chat with my non-gambling friends regularly on Facebook and stuff like that. I think it's just really important to sort of stay in contact with your friends, even if you're not like seeing them every day, if you know what I mean. Just sort of chat with them about stuff.
Agreed, especially at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, John, can we get you back? I'm going to throw open to both of you, and I don't know whether you want to, have a discussion about this, because I think some of these learnings will probably be shared between the two of you. But if you can think about, we'll start with Jono to give Tom a break, but practical advice, like if you went back to you at the beginning or you 2 years ago, or someone who's starting out, what practical advice would you give?
Yeah, we talked about networking and learning off people. That's really important. But also recording what you do, tracking everything is really important. So the other day I thought, well, look, NBA might get back up or baseball might get back up. I'm going to have a look what I'm doing on those models. And then I hadn't touched them for like about 3 months, and I completely forgot what I was up to and what I was trying to do. And it took me a couple of days to try and work out what's going on, what's that variable, what's going on here. So, if you track it, I generally try to track everything. Sometimes I don't. But if you track everything, what your plan is, come up with goals, what you want to test, then you can leave it for a while and then come back and you know exactly where you are. Recording the bets that you make is crucial. It's absolutely crucial. Every single bet that you make, you should record. I'm going to give dailyprofit.com.au another plug. They've got an automatic recording system that logs into bookmakers and records it for you. Betfair is on the list. I think it's next to come. But also recording finishing prices as well. So you might want to record the pinnacle finishing line for sports, or Betfair SP for horse racing is really important, because if you can beat those lines, then you probably do have a winnable model, irrespective of if you're making money or losing money on your actual bets. So that's a great thing to do. And so make a blog as well, record what you want and record bets, and that's what I'd start off with. If you're not into programming, I suggest you do. Probably. I started out with QBasic. I don't know if you remember what that means back in the day. This is when I was a kid. When I was a kid writing computer games and stuff like that, I learned C++, which is a bit dated as well now. But if you don't know how to program, I thoroughly recommend Excel. And I think all the programmers around the world are going, oh, no, Excel. All right? But it's easy. You can do things. You can move things around. And
you can visualize it.
You can record what you're doing, and then you can look back in the code and work out, that's how you do that. and you get an idea of how coding works. And then once you've got that idea, then you can progress into Python or R or something like that to better perform your skills. So that's what I recommend.
Tom, do you have any thoughts on any of those or different thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I started my programming journey in Excel as well, and I think it's extremely valuable. If your data sets aren't massive and you don't need to do experimental techniques or machine learning and stuff like that, Excel's probably the tool for you. Yeah, I've got one. I think it's important to like understand what problem you're trying to tackle. So I don't think people talk about this with a lot of clarity, but even if you like strip away all the complexity of like the different kinds of sports and racing you can bet on, or the different type of derivative markets that you can bet on, inside like a single win market in a basketball match or on a thoroughbred race or something like that, there's like lots of different ways that people are sort of playing the game. So I got an analogy here. It's like a casino. Like even in a thoroughbreds race, there's like a whole bunch of different people playing different games. So you have like people playing the pokies who are like recreational people. You have people like playing baccarat who are like sort of your qualitative form-based people. You have people playing blackjack who are what my friends would call binners, which I'll talk about in a second. And then you have sort of like poker, who are like people who are like fundamentally modeling the outcome of the race, and then using those fundamental probability predictions to make bets. And I think like when I first started, I thought that everyone who was betting over $5 on a horse race or on a basketball match was playing poker, like they were fundamental modelers, and they had big databases with statistical models that fundamentally modeled the true fair odds of a horse and then bet based on that. But that's not actually the reality. And I guess I'm in a pretty unique position in that I've worked at Betfair as well as being on the other side. But you need to sort of understand how you're going to tackle it, because the fundamental modeling problem is extremely difficult. Like, although that there are lots of players who you could be smarter than in a thoroughbred market or a basketball market or something like that, lots of bettors that you could beat, it is hard to beat the consensus of them, and the wisdom of the crowd is a very good prediction normally. So there are other options, and like lots of the times you see some of the content on Betfair and stuff like that about people talking about like edges and like finding sort of statistical relationships with stuff like that. These people are generally like using odds as a baseline and then finding some variables which aren't accounted for. So if you can sort of isolate something, and you can use statistical techniques for this and stuff like that, but if you can find some attribute of a horse or a horse race which isn't like completely captured by the odds, you create a betting rule, and then you can sort of automate it through a third-party tool or automate it through yourself. But that's actually like a lot of the sort of people who you'll hear on Twitter and in Betfair articles and stuff like that. That's generally their approaches. And I think that if you're coming from a data science or quantitative modeling background, it can be easy to go down the fundamental modeling path and thinking that everyone's being really successful doing it, without understanding that like a lot of people are just trying to find one or two variables which aren't fully accounted for in the odds. So I think that's a really important thing to know when you're sort of coming into trying to make money off gambling.
I think it's a really good point. I don't think it's something that we focus on enough. And I really love the idea of understanding what problem you're trying to solve before you start solving it.
Yeah.
Any other particular points either of you want to make before I'm getting bombarded by questions here? So anything else before I start sharing some of these?
Yeah, I'll just talk quickly about the process of getting like a good model. Like, I mean, it's important to, obviously you got to get the data into a database. If you can create a program that can scrape websites and get data in a database. Another really important thing is seeing if the data is correct. And no one's going to look line by line through a database to see if data is correct. So another good way is looking at doing simple things like doing histograms of certain variables. The other day I was looking I was looking through my database of greyhounds, and it said, "Oh, I've got a 300-kilogram dog racing in the next race." I'm like, "What's going on there?" And there was also another dog that was 3.25 kilograms. I'm like, wow, what incredible. Obviously, there was a problem online with the decimal point. They're probably about 30 kilograms each. But just that little bit can bias the whole model, because those outliers play such an important part in your modelling. So you've got to really make sure that your data is correct as well. Because it's not often you, it's often your data source that's a problem. So.
Yeah, I'd echo that. And as a general rule, I'd say like sort of data and understanding is more valuable than sort of technique improvements. So like your return on effort on cleaning outliers and really understanding your variable distributions and stuff like that, you're going to have a much higher return on work that you sink into that than you do sort of iterating on creating a more sophisticated model architecture or a way of producing predictions. So yeah, your return on your data work is definitely much higher than your return on sort of your modeling work, I think. I mean, the modeling is very important, but like once you've got a good or break-even model, the data is going to lift you higher, I think.
Oh, it's the old adage of rubbish in, rubbish out, right?
Yeah.
If you trust what you're modeling, how can you trust the predictions that it gives you?
Yeah.
I think from seeing it from my side, the other thing, and I know that John has echoed elements of this, the other thing is to not stop looking. Like, just because when you source the data that you've got in your model, it was the best data, that doesn't mean it still is. There are new things coming on all the time, especially at the moment. And it's so easy to become a little bit complacent. Yeah, that's my 2 cents on that one.
No, 100%. I think, and you'll find that that sports will change over time as well, and betting patterns. I mean, look at now with sports without any crowds. I mean, home ground advantage. I mean, I could talk for a long time about home ground advantage when there's no crowds. I mean, I think in the NRL the last 2 weeks, I think the away teams have scored almost twice as many points as the home teams. So does the home ground advantage exist there? Rules change. You've got to keep updating your models. You've got to keep on getting your data and reanalyzing it. So yeah, you just got to keep on top of it.
All right, I've got some questions. I'm trying to keep to an hour, so even though I could talk to you two for hours and hours, but I'm going to go to these questions. Jono, any insight into the tools or data sources that you use? Specifically. Yeah,
no problems. For certain sports, you just got to get your databases, your team sports, your scores, the dates, and then you can go into player level statistics that you can download. For AFL, for example, you can get that from the AFL webpage or AFL tables. Horse racing, what other sports? There's lots of other websites out there that have sports. Just look up live results or something like that, and they'll have lots of data sources out there. Horse racing, there's probably like 3 or 4 different websites that are really, really good for horse racing. You've got TRB GTX, I think it's South Coast Racing, Winform, and there's a couple other ones. Something about I don't know, I forget a couple of other ones. Dog racing, you've got GRV, I think, which is great. I think, horse racing, you've got Punters Power or Punters now. They also do, for dog racing, the, what's it called? The greyhound, something blog called the greyhound. So they're the sources that you've got. You just do a Google search, and the greyhound recorder it is, .com.au. So all the data's out there. You just got to create models to get it and download it. So, but if you can get team-based data, and then if it is obviously is important, but also player-based data is really important as well.
And Tom, on the same sort of basis, do you have any other tools or platforms that you use, particularly for your data modeling?
The predictive modeling aspect?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an R guy. So if like in data science, there's like There's two main programming languages, I guess, R and Python. There are some other ones, but I think that those two sort of have become the go-tos. I'm just an R guy because that's what I learned at a few jobs previously, and I've sort of become wedded to that. I do think that it's very good and advocate for it strongly, but Python has a lot of the same stuff.
And is that you basically do everything just in a code?
Yeah, so pretty much my entire pipeline, including most of my like data wrangling and scraping and everything, and that is done in R. And people who don't use R are a little bit confused by that. They think it's like SPSS or something like that. But it is become a bit of a general purpose programming language.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of tools that I use, it's just pretty much R. Even sort of like my sort of bet placement bots that I write for the exchange, they're in R as well.
We had a question on that actually. It was about programming languages for both the modeling and the live, and I know that both of yours are R. Jono, what about you? You said that you had lots of experience, including C++. Is that where your live automation is?
I'm probably a little bit different. I use Excel quite a bit, but I don't use Excel for anything statistical, of course, because it's rubbish. Don't believe that the random function in Excel is anything random, because it's not. So I use Minitab and also R to do my Minitab it's similar to SPSS to do my statistical analysis. But as far as betting goes on Betfair, I use Excel through BetAngel, and yeah, that's how I do that. So,
wow. I actually have a question here on what we consider third-party tools. To both of you, which existing betting tools that are out there would you rate? So obviously you use BetAngel, Jono. Are there any others that you've got opinions on?
No, not really.
And Tom, you haven't done much in that space at all, have you? You've just done it basically yourself, yeah?
Yeah, but if I was doing it a different way and I didn't sort of have big, long projects where I was focusing, like really trying to fine tune my rating set, and I'm sinking a huge amount of time in that, and I wanted to sink a huge amount of time into the bet placement as well. Yeah, it's a lot of work to do it from scratch. So yeah, if I was trying to do across like multiple sports or multiple different race types, and I was only using simple form features or stuff that was available through the Betfair API or whatever, yeah, I would probably investigate using one of those tools, because yeah, much less overhead. There's a lot of overhead in like writing it all from scratch.
There is, and there's also an awful lot of like, you know, the battle testing and the catching for exceptions, and
oh yeah,
it's great if you can do it, but you know, it definitely does take effort.
Yeah,
people necessarily always appreciate that going in.
Yeah, I sort of have evolved a little bit, and like I started with reasonably simple bet placement, mostly BSB and stuff like that, and I've eventually tried to sort of expand that into sort of like a live market trading bot, and the programming for that is
More complicated,
beyond my abilities. I've managed to get something up and running, but it's very difficult to do if it's not like what you used to, sort of programming live systems and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I see a lot of that. People who have awesome models, but they need to automate. Yeah, no, I get it. One last one on tools. In terms of tracking performance, are there any other visualization tools that you use? So, Jono, you said you used Excel for elements of that. I assume, Tom, you use RStudio as part of your R to get the graphs.
Yeah, sorry, my answers are very boring. I'm just
R.
So like I use R Shiny and R Markdown and a few sort of like modules within R to send myself like reports, and I have a few like web apps and stuff like that that I use to like check my ratings and check my profit and stuff like that.
Jono, do you have any others to add?
Not really. No, I don't. No.
Sure. Jono, to you, it's an interesting one. what do you consider to be the most underrated or overrated factors when it comes to horse racing?
Well, good question. I think obviously knows that the rating for the horse is important. The jockey is very important. I think there's other factors like the amount of days it's been since a horse has last raced, which is very important as well. Usually a horse, usually a horse will come back and then improve for a few more races and then start to dwindle out until it has a spell. So it's important to track when you think a horse is on the improve or whether it's sort of like fading out a bit. Yeah, that's probably what I think. That's probably a really important one. You got me. I have to have another think about some other ones, but
okay. If you have another one, come back to it.
Yep.
But I'll throw to Tom. When you are looking at EV, so EV expected value, the question here is: have you found that your EV versus the closing price, so say BSP, over a large number of samples, generally converges?
Yeah, so this is something I've been like thinking about a lot recently because I thought my bot was doing really well, but then it seemed like I wasn't doing as well as I thought it was. It's something that like you can get confused sort of switching between certain sports and racing codes and stuff like that. So like the dogma for sports betting, I think, is that like it's almost on big enough sports, it's almost impossible to sort of have a model that is profitable at the closing line. So the only way that you can measure, or the closing price, sorry, the only way that you can measure whether or not you're good or not is by getting a price that's better than the closing price. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you hear a lot of people talking about.
Beat SP.
Yeah, do you beat SP or not? But it doesn't, it's an important part, and like earning EV from beating BSP on greyhounds, for example, is a way to make money, and you can make money off of it. But also people can have models that are profitable at BSP. And there are definitely lots of people on Betfair that have strategies where they bet BSP and make money. So
I'm amazed at that. It's seeing exactly the same thing. I had an assumption that people didn't use BSP if they were more sophisticated, but that's, the last couple of years that's been dispelled. A lot of people who, like have very sophisticated approaches do actually use it because it's a good price.
Yeah, it's a good price on some things.
Reliable generally.
But yeah, so the EV part is important, and if you're sort of not betting BSP and you're betting beforehand, measuring your EV is going to tell you one part of your profit, and then the second part is hopefully it should converge to your profitability that you get if you're backtesting at BSP. So you should have some component which is your profitability at BSP, and then hopefully you have some EV that you're getting which is priced above the BSP or below the BSP, whatever you're betting backing or laying.
Yep.
But in theory, your profitability should converge to those two numbers combined, but it doesn't really work like that normally. There's always slippage.
Modeling's a good theory, but
yeah.
For Jono, this is a very interesting one. How do you balance out collecting data, maintaining a database, that side of what you do, with analysing and refining your model?
Basically, I collect data every day. If the sport's been played, it downloads, it goes into a database. So traditionally, with a lot of sports being played in Europe and America, I'll do that first thing in the morning, and then make predictions based on that. As far as analysing and re-looking at your model, I tend to do that probably only twice a year for each sport. So one in the middle of the year and one at the start of each season. I'll come back to it if I see trends have changed. Obviously, like recently with the no crowds in the sports, I'll have to adjust for that now, of course. So that's probably what I do. Just download it and readjust. Obviously, if there's a model that isn't making a profit, or I know I can do better, then that's where a lot of my time gets spent in trying to improve it, add new variables, suss out variables to see if they're correct or not, or And yeah, so that takes up a lot of my time, just analysing the different new variables that I could put into the model.
Back at Tom, and you might have an opinion on this one too, John, because I think it's really important. There are several questions about it in different approaches, so I'll try and ask most of them here. Staking goes back to a bit like I asked you earlier. What's your approach to staking? Do you do things like Kelly? Do you take and hold a position? Do you trade? How do you determine what you risk? Do you flat stake? Do you stake to win? Do you stake to lose? Going to start with Tom, but I want your opinion too, John, because this is something that is obviously pretty fundamental to how you strategize your model.
Yeah. So I do proportional staking, so like some sort of flavor of Kelly, but it took me a long time to get there. So I guess my advice would be that like I think that proportional staking, well, flat staking is good when your model makes mistakes regularly, because mistakes are like disproportionately or asymmetrically punished when you have proportional staking. You have these outliers and you have these weird predictions, and you're not like fully on top of like mistakes that your model makes regularly. Proportional staking can be very hard, but it also is obviously the purest and best way to do it. So yeah, I don't trade out of positions, just because in theory it sort of shouldn't matter. It should, like, you should make just as much money. If you win at SP, for example, you shouldn't trade out because you have an edge at SP. But yeah, so I use a flavor of Kelly, which is like what I call Tick Kelly. Made it up myself, which is basically it's like, instead of the scaling factor on your Kelly bank proportion being proportional to the difference in probabilities, it's proportional to like the number of rungs on the Betfair ladder different.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that Kelly typically like really heavily stakes up on short odds things, and those things are generally the most efficient on Betfair markets, and they can be hard to win on. And Tick Kelly gives you a little bit more stake size on some of the overlays you see at bigger odds. So yeah, but it's just a matter of choosing some scale of value that your model sees relative to the market, and sort of, you can obviously overfit it, but like choosing one that you think makes sense for your model.
Jono, what about you?
Yeah, to answer your other question about horse racing, age of the horse, at least in comparison to other horses, and also the sex of the horse in comparison to other horses racing, are probably undervalued in horse racing. But as staking goes, I'm a Kelly fan as well. But I agree as well that obviously, like, sometimes it comes up with a variable like, what? I've got to bet that much. And it's like, no, that's incredible. So obviously there's a limit to it, whether or not you get limited by the bookmakers making that, or you decide to tone it down for those bigger overlays. One of those two things. As far as hedging back into the market, I don't do that. And the reason is reasonably simple. So if you're betting, say you're betting $1.90 on the Hawks, and they come into $1.70, and you want to hedge it on the other side to make a profit, you're basically paying the vig of the bookmaker twice. So if you assume you've got the overlay to start off with, then you're actually betting on an underlay the second time, because you assume you've got that advantage even if the odds have moved. The only way that you wouldn't pay the vig is if you hedged on Betfair, because obviously you're not paying extra money to the bookmaker. And there is some analysis on that it can be beneficial, especially when you're starting off, if you've got a small bank balance, because as long as you've got the advantage to start off with, because you are concerned about getting bank growth, as opposed to, it's a lot easier to just grow steadily up as opposed to go up and down like this, but up. Obviously, I've got enough bank growth, I'm happy for it to go up and down a bit more as long as the head's up. But if you're starting off, then there is a way to do that. But Betfair may be an option to hedge, but definitely not at bookmakers.
Do you both back and lane? Do you have proportions of ballpark, what they are in terms of your backs versus your lays? Tom?
Yeah, I back and lay. I would, off the top of my head, like a little bit more laying than backing, just because obviously more things lose than they win. But yeah, I try and sort of have the purest pipeline possible, in that, like, if the model predicts something that isn't value, then you should be able to lay it proportionally to how overrated your model thinks it is.
And John?
Yeah, well, in sports betting, obviously, it makes a little difference if you back or lay. You're doing the same thing.
If it's a two outcome. If it's two
yeah,
outcome.
yeah, you don't see many sports with 3 teams playing, do you? I don't know. I guess, if you're playing golf or winning a tennis tournament or something like that, you could.
Or if there's a draw option.
Yes. If there's a draw option, I try and stay away from those ones with draw options. So,
Generally so.
yeah, because modelling a draw, don't get that. It seems useless to me. But anyway, but in horse racing, I'm generally backing. But I do analysis for both of them, for backing and laying, to see if there are advantages in laying certain horses in certain times, and there are definitely. But I'm generally mostly backing for horse racing and greyhounds.
Got 2 more questions I'm going to ask, and then I'm keeping to my hour. I'm going to throw this one to Tom, and it is, how do you test and measure multiple variables within an actual market?
What variables would we be talking about there?
Good question.
Where's the question?
So, how do you test and measure multiple variables within the market? So it keeps going here. So, for example, if you want to back at 5 minutes versus 3 minutes versus 1 minute, how would you manage the actual results once you're starting to bet? Instead of having multiple Betfair accounts, do you use, so obviously you can use a strategy ref if you're doing it yourself.
Yeah.
That's a way of doing it. Do you use that? Is there any way that you go about doing it? I've heard people who use different stakes so they can.
No, I definitely use the strategy ref in Betfair. It's very good.
Yeah, that's my go-to as well. Obviously, a problem if you're using something at BetAngel, Jono, because it's not an option.
Yeah, it is. You've just taught me something new, and I'm going to go and have a look at it. So it's great to communicate with
you and I are going to have a conversation about automation.
Sounds good. You're shaking your head when I'm talking about Betfair. So.
You kill me. And then I've got one last one for you, Jono. I've got so many here. Goodness me. So final one. How much does price play in your model, or is it independent to your ratings?
0.
You don't care?
0. Actually, no, hang on. It does a little bit, actually. It does. In horse racing and dog racing, if you've got a horse or a dog that hasn't raced before and I've got no data on it, then I specifically give it a rating based on the odds.
Yep.
So therefore, there'll be no overlay on that dog and there'll be no underlay on that dog. And then adjust all the other horses and dogs based on that. So the probabilities all up to 100%. As far as I understand what we were saying before, you can put the price in and get other variables on top of that. That is a great strategy. I try not to do that. I try just to get it from scratch. Other things you can do instead of odds, you can put other people's variables in there. So you can get other tipsters who have ratings in yours. And you can create a model of like 7 tipsters and then your variables. And then it will say, yeah, that tipster's crap, that tipster's good, or whatever else like that. So that, in a sense, is like looking at price, even though it's not the official price. But,
someone else's price.
Someone else's price, that's right.
Yeah. I love it. We've got still lots of questions that are unanswered, but I promised an hour. What I'm going to do is, for anyone who is on the Slack community or wants to be, I'll post some of the other ones that have come through on there. We got a couple that came through separately as well that I'll also add. And then maybe if you guys over the next day or so have a chance to answer with your thoughts on there, including obviously there are some here that have slightly more complicated answers, and I want to give you an opportunity to answer in more than a 60-second soundbite, because I know you both have opinions that sometimes need explaining. So anyone who isn't already on the Betfair quants Slack channel, obviously you can just look it up, or hit us up on one of our multiple email addresses, api@betfair.com.au, or Twitter, or any of those, and any of us can send you an invite. It's an open community. There's no gating there. It's not run by us. It's just a community. And we'll definitely add you so that you can be part of the conversation. Thank you guys both very much for your time, for coming and joining us, for sharing so much. I'm always blown away by how willing this community is to share experiences, share learnings. I think it's one of the coolest parts of the people that we get to work with and interact with here. So thank you both very much. And in advance for any extra insights that you're happy to give on the Slack channel later. Thanks for all the questions. I hoped that this would be the way that you guys played, in terms of giving lots of different thoughts, which just makes it really vibrant and really interesting. If you have any feedback, we'll send a follow-up email to anyone who's here tomorrow, and we would love your feedback, especially for people who've been to both the physical meetups that we've held and these online ones, about what you liked about this, what you didn't like about this, because going forward, once we're allowed to go back to physical reality, we want to know whether you just want physical things, or whether you'd like online more, or whether you want a bit of both. And if we don't get that feedback, we can't act on it. So would love any feedback. Also, we'll send you emails, and we're always here to help. So please just reach out. That's what we're here for. But across the board, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jono. Thank you, Ben, in the background, for doing all the tech stuff that I just hate doing. So really appreciate you making it all so smooth this evening, and for me not having to apologize for anything in the tech vein. And thank you guys for taking part and for sharing all your queries and thoughts. Looking forward to continuing it in the Slack community offline. Thanks, guys. Have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody.